What is your name, today's date, and where we are?
My name is Herschell Hamilton. Today's date is February 7th, 2013, and we are at the Vulcan Park and Museum facility.
Great. All right, and when were you born and where?
I was born in Birmingham, Alabama, December 2nd, 1962.
And what were the name of your parents?
My father was Herschell Lee Hamilton, and my mother is Willa Yvonne Hamilton, W-I-L-L-A-Y-V-O-N-N-E Hamilton.
Right. And where were they from originally?
My mother is from Birmingham, and my father was from Pensacola, Florida.
And how did your father come up to Birmingham?
After he did his medical residency in St. Louis, Missouri, he came to Birmingham to start a practice in 1959.
Great. And do you have any brothers or sisters?
I have 3 sisters.
All right. What are their names?
Rachel, Jacqueline, and Sharon. Do you need their full married names?
That's all right.
Okay.
All right, and tell us more about your background, your education, where you grew up, where around Birmingham you're from.
I grew up in the Titusville community in Birmingham, or more specifically Woodland Park, which is a small section in the Titusville community. I went to West Center Street Elementary School and to Parker High School. After graduating from Parker High School, I went to Howard University in Washington, D.C. And after Howard, came back to Birmingham and worked, and subsequently went to Birmingham Southern and got a master's degree in public and private management.
Great. And your wife's name and how y'all met and what date y'all married?
My wife's name is Majella, M-A-J-E-L-L-A, Majella Chube Hamilton, C-H-U-B-E, Hamilton. We met at Howard University in Washington. She is originally from Franklin, Louisiana.
Great. And tell us more about your family history. Your mom's from Birmingham, but what part of Birmingham is she from?
She grew up in the Smithfield community. My family on my mother's side, by and large, came up to Birmingham from Hale County, a little town down there, or informal town they call Freetown, down near Demopolis.
Great. And tell me about your father's practice here in Birmingham.
He came to Birmingham in 1959, and I guess I can just kind of go back. He went to Florida A&M for undergraduate school, and from Florida A&M he went to Meharry Medical College in Nashville, Tennessee, and then from Meharry to Homer G. Phillips Hospital in St. Louis, Missouri, where he did his surgical residency. And from St. Louis to Birmingham. He established his practice at a building called a Ballard House down in the Birmingham Civil Rights District. It's actually right around the corner from 16th Street Church in Kelly Park. And so from there, he started a practice that was really sponsored by U.S. Steel. I think he was recruited to Birmingham by U.S. Steel, and U.S. Steel and or the United Mine Workers. And And so he started his private practice at the Ballard House. And from there, he was granted privileges at various hospitals throughout the city, UAB, South Highlands, which is now UAB Highlands. It used to be a separate hospital called South Highlands. Holy Family Hospital, which was affiliated with Holy Family High School and Elementary School out in Ensley. That was the hospital that mostly catered to the African American community. And I think he was also on the staff of Baptist Medical Center, Princeton. And so he had privileges and did all his surgical procedures at those hospitals throughout the city.
And he was a general surgeon?
General surgeon. Mm-hmm.
Do you know anything about how he got into the practice, or how he came around and wanted to go to medical school or anything like that?
Not really. I think that as a young child, he always just dreamt of becoming a doctor, and I think that his life experiences just led him to that.
Do you know anything more about how U.S. Steel and United Mine Workers recruited him?
My understanding is that during that period of time, they needed to find an African American physician to cater to the African American workers who were employed by the company or members of the local union. I think they were just actively recruiting a physician to come to town to see after their folks.
But his was a private practice,
Mm-hmm.
but they just endorsed him.
Well, I'm not sure. I think they were instrumental in recruiting him to Birmingham and helping him initially establish the practice in some form or fashion. I don't know if that was through a contractual relationship where he had a contractual relationship to see their patients or some other means. But that really just kind of, he got to Birmingham and he began to realize a lot of the disparities that existed in the city between black folks and white folks. He would always tell us stories about how when he would make rounds over at UAB Hospital, that all the black people were in the basement, when in wards with exposed pipes and everything else, and all the other patients, the white patients, were all upstairs. So he's recounted a number of instances, from the early '60s where, it was just really difficult for African American professionals, especially physicians, to thrive in the environment. But as he always said, he was prepared and he was well trained, so he wasn't intimidated by all the issues and insults that he encountered. He said he just did his job and did it well.
And do you know if he was the first to kind of be endorsed by U.S. Steel or United Mine Workers, or if they had anybody before?
I'm not certain if they had anybody before, but he was the first board certified general surgeon, African American general surgeon in the city of Birmingham. He was always a stickler for certifications and qualifications, and so especially as it related to the medical profession, and so that was really important to him, because within the profession, being board certified is a is a stamp of approval, and so that was something that was important to him. And
did he tell you any other stories that were like having people in the basement during the '60s? Or?
Well, he provided some quotes and comments to the Anniston Star, 10 or more years ago, and during that interview he recounted how when he was at UAB making rounds with the residents, that they get to the elevators, and during those times they had the elevator operators, someone sitting on the elevator to control the elevator, and they didn't believe that he was a doctor. And so the residents would get on the elevator and ride up, the white residents, and he would take the steps up. He also recounted how when he initially got here, at the hospitals they have doctors' parking lots. And, when he would come and the attendants would be there, they would refuse to let him park because they didn't believe he was a doctor. So, those were the conditions that existed in Birmingham during, 1959, early 1960s. And, he just proved himself by doing good work and establishing a really loyal and significant patient base, and by, performing his procedures and, taking care of patients within all the hospitals that he operated.
That's great. Had he experienced anything like that, any of the other places he worked at, St. Louis or Florida or Nashville or any of that?
Not that I recall. I think St. Louis may have been slightly more progressive during that period of time. When he grew up as a kid in Pensacola, Pensacola was a segregated city. And so as a child, going to elementary and high school, he went to predominantly black schools and lived in a predominantly black neighborhood. So, as was typically the case, he was born in 1925. So his early childhood years in Pensacola were, in the 20s and 30s. I guess I should, maybe 20s to 40s. And so.
It's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
That's all the questions I have. Are there any other comments or anything you'd like to add to any of it?
I think I've talked a fair amount about my father. On my mother's side, her family's path was really, I guess, typical of a lot of rural families that made their way to Birmingham in search of jobs and opportunity and greater exposure. My great-grandfather, my grandfather, worked for the railroads and worked in the mines. My great-grandmother and grandmother took care of a lot of the family members that came up from Hale County and other places around the country looking for opportunity here. It was a classic extended family scenario where you have grandmothers and mothers who take care of all the things at home and make sure that all the money is in order and make sure that all the things that are necessary to sustain the family are taken care of, and the guys are sent out to work. And they managed that kind of extended family existence for a number of years. As a matter of fact, my mother was an only child, and she would talk about how she used to call her house the Ark, because my great grandfather would just keep adding on to it, to accommodate the more and more relatives that would come through. So the house was kind of like a way station for people as they came to town and got established. And I think that's a part of the African American experience here in Birmingham that is similar to the Great Migration, people from the South moving up to the Midwest and to the East Coast. Similar kind of reception from relatives, similar kind of extended family situations until people get stable and are able to go out on their own. So so my mother's family had that kind of rich experience here in Birmingham.
Do you know what railroad and mine companies they worked with?
I think my grandfather worked for TCI, Tennessee Coal and Iron, and I'm not sure about my great-grandfather. Mm-hmm. And my grandfather was a Pullman porter as well, so he worked on the railroads for a period of time.
Great. And how did your mother and your father meet?
That's an interesting question. I'm not sure if I know the answer to that question. Somewhere here, shortly after he got to Birmingham, he started making his rounds in the community, and, and they met. I think they were introduced by a friend of hers. So, I think they were, during that period of time, within the African American community, they had established their own social fabric, and I think a friend of a friend, an introduction within that community, kind of got them together.
And did she have any stories about Birmingham during the 1960s or earlier, about what she grew up in and what that was like for her here?
Mm-hmm.
Did she have any stories like that?
Her stories.
You're going to interview her?
Oh, I'm sorry.
You're going to interview her?
We're going to try to. Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, her stories really revolve around family and the issues that they confronted. As they I guess work to survive and thrive in a city like Birmingham. My mother's family were members of 16th Street Church, and she not too long ago recounted to me how on the day that the church was bombed, my grandmother kept calling our house, asking her why she was late, because she wanted to get the kid, she wanted us to go to Sunday school that morning. And for some reason, my mom said that she just, was dragging and just, couldn't get us down to church for Sunday school. And they lived over on near College Hills. My mother and father, we lived over near College Hills. My grandmother and grandfather and great-grandmother lived in Smithfield. And so she just recounts hearing the explosion that day, and she said that my grandmother, from that day forward, my grandmother never badgered her about getting us to Sunday school. Those are really kind of like twist of fate moments, in which, and a lot of families have similar stories, and they're kind of interwoven into the fabric of Birmingham and the events that shaped and surrounded Birmingham. One other thing that I'll mention to you about my dad, he practiced out of the Ballard House, and the Ballard House was operated and owned at the time by a lady named Jessie Perkins. And the Ballard House was one of the few places that black social, civics, and fraternal organizations could meet, because that was during the segregated days in Birmingham. And so from the location in the Ballard House, he really served the civil rights community. He was he treated the marchers, when they were injured, and sent them back out. He treated Martin Luther King and Shuttlesworth. As a matter of fact, he and Shuttlesworth were very, very good and very close friends over the course of their lives. And they, he became known as a dog bite doctor, or the battle surgeon, just because, of his participation in the movement and his activities with the foot soldiers. He supported the movement financially, and he supported it, in a host of other ways, providing, medical support, attention, money, just to, do all the things that he could do as a professional here in Birmingham to support all of the activities, during the civil rights days. So the Ballard House and his presence at the Ballard House really became a pivotal place, because on the one hand, you had Miss Perkins, who hosted events and organizations, and she actually upstairs in the Ballard House, it was, she even roomed people upstairs. And then in my dad's office, which is in one quarter of the Ballard House, he was doing all of his activities, and participating in the movement, and as well as providing medical care and services to the community, the African American community at the time.
Did he ever talk about some of those wounds and things that he treated?
Well, it's really interesting. One of the things that I really never realized is that he would tell me about the damage that water hoses could do, because the water pressure is so intense that it actually almost like peels the skin off if you are hosed down at close close distance by water hoses. And so people would be treated, it was almost like burns to the skin. And if if you think about it, you can, you get it, but you don't, typically you don't say, man, that must have hurt. And so it really did, and people were like severely injured by those water cannons and water hoses. So just a host of, a lot of instances, a lot of, him recounting stories like that, kind of set the framework for how my sisters and I grew up, and our perspectives, and our respect for people who fought and sacrificed much to provide opportunities for other folks. Yeah.
Do you have any memories from that time period?
I was born in 1962, so I was, in the early 60s, a baby or a toddler. So I don't have any prominent memories. I think the thing that really sticks out to me most was when I was a kid. We lived over for a time in North Birmingham, and my dad would always tell us not to answer the door for strangers. And I remember one day the police came to the door, and I answered the door. And, they talked to the police, and the police went on, and my dad, chastised me about, opening the door. And I said, well, it was the police. And he said, especially not the police. So, that was one of those periods of time where there was distrust between folks in the African-American community and the police, who were there to protect and serve, because the history of the police force in Birmingham and other places in the South was that they were not protecting and serving. They were part of the problem. They were part of the terrorist activities that were occurring and being unleashed on black folks throughout the community. So as a kid, my perspective is the police is there to help, and he had to admonish me that in addition to not opening the doors for strangers, I especially did need to open the door for the police. Yeah.
Are there any other comments or anything, extra stories or anything you'd like to tell us about?
Not at this point.
Okay. Thank you very much. We appreciate you
You're
talking
welcome.
to us today.
You're welcome.